Judge ready? We affirm resolve committing U.S. ground combat troops to fight ISIL in the best interest of the United States. Intention 1, Special Forces. There are many different ways that ground combat troops can be deployed. One of those ways being special operations. Spec ops are different than any other kinds of deployment because, according to David Eisenberg, the typical SOF soldier is far more accustomed to interacting with foreign nationals than the average service member. Language skills and culture appreciation are taught in their military training and carried over into the professional approach taken as a civilian specialist. Tactical analysis of intelligence is a basic part of any special operation mission. Robert Farley, University of Kentucky, furthers that special operators have the expertise to identify whether and how U.S. forces should strike ISIS's hardpoints. Special operations defeat ISIS in 2 ways. First, intelligence gathering. According to the Washington Times, a senior intelligence official acknowledged shortcomings with intelligence on Iraq. Intelligence collection diminished significantly following the U.S. withdrawal in Iraq in 2011, when we lost some of the boots-on-the-ground view of what was going on. We cannot operate beyond the lines established by the U.S. military. They further by stating that it is harder to find people who will cooperate, harder to find means of verifying what is collected. There is no intel substitute for boots on the ground. Second, leader decapitation. According to Aaron Sharp from Mirror Magazine, U.S. Special Forces troops are forming a hunter-kill unit called Task Force Black. The undercover warriors will aim to cut the head off the snake by hitting the command structure of the Islamic terrorist group. They further by stating that defeating ISIS cannot be done with airstrikes alone. You have to get on the ground and take out the commanders, cut off the snake's head. Patrick B. Johnson of the Harvard Belfer Center explains that when leader decapitation occurs, war termination increases. Quote, leadership decapitation increases the probability of war termination by 27%. Johnson furthers that governments are more likely to win when they successfully target military leaders, estimated 32% more likely to defeat insurgencies. Contention 2, regional actors fail. While ISIS is in fact a threat to the United States, the actors in the region are no solution to the problem. There are no other countries that have the capabilities to take on the Islamic State the way the U.S. could. Thomas Donnelly from the American Enterprise Institute explains that there is no regional force capable of protecting or sustaining the kind of land power needed to isolate and reduce ISIS. First, looking at Iraq, we see their forces are not strong enough. According to The Guardian, ISIS will not be pushed out of Iraq for another year or two because the country's armed forces are not ready or equipped to fight back on the ground yet. Jim Mizalewski, a chief Pentagon correspondent, finds that they could only ever be successful with U.S. troops. Quote, Iraqi military forces backed by American ground troops could launch an assault to wrestle control of the city of Mosul from ISIS. Second, Iran. According to Majid Sadegh, director of the Organization of Iranian American Communities, ISIL's increasing reputation as the main security threat in the region has actually overshadowed the much greater threat from Iran. Iran is actually helping it behind the scenes. Not only is Tehran benefiting from the ISIL scenario, it's played an instrumental role in creating this threat by empowering Assad. Tehran is now using the situation in Iraq and Syria as a leverage in nuclear talks with the West. Third, Syria. According to Cassandra Vinograd from NBC News, Syria's military and ISIS may be sworn enemies, but instead of wiping each other off the battlefield, they've been delicately dancing around each other. Of the 1,000 counterterrorism operations, just 6% directly target ISIS. Fourth, the Kurdish Peshmerga. According to Metin Gurkan from the Al Monitor, most of the Peshmerga units are made up of middle-aged men who have no training and experience in urban warfare. It is a parliamentary force of poorly equipped civilians. There is not a single offensive operation that the Peshmerga has won in its history. The basic goal has always been to stand the strategic defense and compel the invading forces to withdraw. Ultimately, according to the U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, the Islamic State is a threat to America and must be confronted. And according to the American Enterprise Institute, one indispensable actor in ensuring that defeat is the U.S. This is simply not a matter of regional interest. It is a matter of U.S. interest because ISIS threatens and kills Americans as well as threatening regional stability. This we affirm.
We'll take a little bit of brain prep time. Students get I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah, we'll start it right now.
There we go.
Okay. We're doing prep. 20 seconds. Take your time, Jake. Yeah. Make sure on the play. Everyone's ready?
1 second, hold on.
For sure.
We'll start online, so I said it next time.
Right. Everyone's ready? Okay. We negate and observe the primary interest of any nation is to protect the lives of its citizens. Contention 1 is troop deaths. The New America Foundation notes that the latest insurgency in Iraq feels a lot like previous insurgencies in Iraq. Thus, a similar use of combat ground troops would be unsurprising. According to Peter Nealon of SOFREP, if the United States uses troops, it will look like a near repeat of our 2003 invasion. Dr. Stephen Biddle of George Washington University writes that we can reasonably expect a ground war to last 10 years. Former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morrell even finds that an effective retaliation against the Islamic State would require 100,000 boots on the ground. Unfortunately, a repeat of mass deployment will bring a repeat of mass death. As RT News laments, Americans will inevitably have to die on the battlefield if we want to destroy ISIS. According to the Iraqi coalition casualty count, 4,500 Americans died in our last Iraqi ground war. Fighting terrorism simply isn't worth this massive loss of life. Foreign Affairs writes in the post-9/11 era, the United States has built up an extensive infrastructure of counterterrorism intelligence. Each year, U.S. intelligence agencies produce 50,000 reports on terrorism. This structure has helped make terrorist attacks on U.S. soil exceedingly rare. The University of North Carolina quantifies that in the 14 years after 9/11, Muslim-linked terrorism has only claimed the lives of 37 Americans. Even if fighting ISIL were to somehow eliminate all Islamic extremism in the world, it would only just save over an average of 2 lives a year. Ultimately, committing combat ground troops cannot possibly save more lives than it would kill. Contention 2 is a political problem. According to the Foreign Policy Journal, the root causes of the ISIL insurgency come from disenfranchisement by the Iraqi government. In the absence of freedom, Iraqis lack legitimate outlets to express their political grievances, making them more likely to resort to political violence and terrorism. You can't solve this political problem with military intervention, which is why the Foreign Policy Journal furthers that in the long term, the war against ISIL cannot be won with military action. We have seen this before. In our last war in Iraq, we spent years defeating AQI only to see ISIS emerge. This time, it will be no different. According to Vox, non-ISIS terrorist groups have deeper roots in local towns and cities. Given their more resonant ideology, these other groups might be able to mount a more powerful and deadlier insurgency than even ISIS does now. In fact, committing combat ground troops might even exacerbate the political disenfranchisement that is the root cause of the issue in Iraq. The New York Times writes that if we get militarily involved now, our actions could undermine a more inclusive political power-sharing agreement from emerging down the road. Al Jazeera explains that foreign military assistance has contributed to the Iraqi Prime Minister's rigidity. The more U.S. support, the more he feels he can refuse to compromise politically in order to stop the current insurgency. This only worsens the root cause of the current conflict. Contention 3 is civilian deaths. According to Eric Neumeier of the London School of Economics, U.S. citizens only ever become victims of international terrorism because of America's engagement on the world scene. He explains that an important cause of the higher level of anti-American terrorism is U.S. military support to foreign countries whose governments are in conflict with terrorist groups. Thomas Plumber of the University of Essex corroborates, writing that terror groups ultimately strive for political influence in their home country. And the greater American military support to a country, the more America represents an effective brake on this terrorist goal. According to Neumeier, this is because American military personnel are able to actively engage in counter-terrorist actions, and even when they don't, they help the government by performing some other necessary military duties. This is problematic because Plumber finds that when America makes it less likely for a terror group to achieve its goals within its own country, an attack on American citizens maximizes the strategic value of the terrorist group. By directly targeting American citizens, the terrorist leaders hope to trigger American withdrawal from the region. He continues that rightly or wrongly, current terrorist leaders believe that attacking American civilians will ultimately induce the USA to withdraw from the Middle East, and that this would enable them to expand their political influence in their home country. For example, in the past, Osama bin Laden has repeatedly professed his conviction that the USA are cowards who will give in if only hit hard and long enough. This increased incentive given to attack Americans means that committing American troops creates more American deaths ultimately from terrorism, even if the mission is successful. Eric Neumeier quantifies that a 1 standard deviation increase in U.S. troop presence raises anti-American terrorism by 30%, even if terrorism overall is falling. And for these reasons, we urge negative ballot. Ready for crossfire?
Yeah. So in your first contention, you talked about these troop deaths. So if we don't go in and ISIS becomes stronger, where did that ultimately cause more civilian casualties, though, and then the lives that we are losing with these troops be outweighed?
So I want to differentiate between two things right now, right? There are civilian casualties in the rest of the world. Those are humanitarian concerns. And then there is attacks on U.S. citizens, right?
Okay.
So what is your argument?
Okay, so if we don't go in and they get stronger, and they end up hurting not only us, but also our allies, isn't that a concern that we should stop now?
Okay, so what I would say is in terms of the threat to US citizens, right, the entirety of Islamic extremism since 9/11 has only killed 2 people a year. And that's because we have this intelligence infrastructure in place, right? Even if that was to double, it would just be 2 more lives a year, right? It's not actually a threat to American citizens, American lives, and I would say that's a premier impact above anything else that you're talking about in today's round. The lives of American citizens are the most important impact, and that's what you need to be evaluating first.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So in your second contention, you talk about how no other actor can actually solve the problem, right? Your warrant for that is that no other actor can supply the necessary force, right?
Okay.
So if no other actor can supply necessary force, then the force is probably large, right?
Oh, whose force? They're different regional actors?
You said that the reason we need America, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
It's
quote
because we have the
says,
capabilities, because, yeah.
is
sure,
no
we-
other country has
Have
the
the
capability to
capabilities, yeah.
sustain that kind of large force in the region.
Okay.
So the force is going to be large.
Wait, no, hold on. Not necessarily. What we're telling you, like, first, we can look to
So
Peshmerga, right?
how many
They
troops?
don't-
How
they
many
literally-
troops would this hypothetically include this mission?
I mean, I'm not gonna just make up a number. I can't tell you how many.
Give me a ballpark, right?
Of how many troops that Peshmerga is gonna send
See,
in.
if it's going to be a small number of troops, right, then I don't see why other countries in the region can't sustain a minor intervention. If it's a large intervention,
But
then
if
that
they're
sort of
not
links
even
into our troop death
successful,
argument.
if they're not trained for this, if they don't have the capabilities, like regardless of the size, they're not.
A
gonna be
country
successful.
can't find like 3,000,
But
5,000
if they're
special
not-
operations forces
if
within
they're
their
not
country.
trained, why can't, okay, the whole point that we're trying to make
The
is
reason
that-
you say special operation forces is better is because they can integrate into society. Isn't local population the best way to actually integrate
Not
into
if
the
they're-
local
not if-
population?
Wait, not if they're trained, not if they don't have the capabilities.
There are not
if-
5,000 trained soldiers in the Iraqi army?
I mean, like what we're telling you and what the Guardian tells you is that they're not.
The
trained.
Guardian might
They
tell me
don't
that,
have
but the Guardian might also be
capabilities.
wrong.
But they're not.
What the Guardian is saying, right?
Why
The
can't
reason
you-
the Guardian is saying that probably is because the Guardian is saying they
Probably,
can't
but you
sustain a
haven't read
large
the article.
force, right? But that means we're sending a large
Hold on,
force
hold on,
and
hold
not this small like spec
No, no,
ops
no.
operation.
Hold on, you're taking this in the complete wrong direction. We're not talking about the problems with ISIS's troops. We're talking about the other people in the region.
That's what I'm
They don't-
saying.
Okay, they don't have that capability. Sure, one of the reasons could be size. Another reason just because they don't have the weapons to do so. Like there's
They
different.
get American weapons. We send them American weapons all the time in terms of aid.
Have we like who have we given weapons to and why haven't
The
they
Iraqi
used it?
government.
So wait, why haven't they?
The
been-
Kurdish militia.
Wait, Kurdish are trained. Like that's what the cards are telling you. They don't actually
They
want.
might not have a large trained force, but they do have some people who are
But
trained.
they're
That doesn't
not
logically
successful.
make any
Like,
sense.
They aren't successful.
Because they don't have the large force. So the key is here, the reason that card, the only reason it makes sense why that card is true is because it's a large force, not a spec ops operation.
Oh, you're not first.
No.
Yeah.
Point.
Yeah, I was trying to say, I'm like,
I was
what?
like,
Okay.
I'm just so excited to get my vote.
Do you guys want prep?
Yeah.
yes, please.
Okay.
How long is it?
57?
Okay, left or you
It's
use?
used.
Okay.
You can borrow mine.
I think I'm good. Thank you, though. All right.
So is everybody ready?
let's start at the top with their observation, which is just that the idea we have a duty towards American lives. But remember, this is not just in the short term, but in the long term. While you can't evaluate just the threat of what's going to happen right now, but what's going to happen in the future as well. So the point is, if ISIS is a threat right now, maybe sure, 2 Americans a day are dying. But in the long term, if ISIS, like we're proving to you, is going to become more of a threat, is going to become more capable of harming American lives, and we can solve that problem in the status quo, that's what you want to prefer in today's round. But let's go to my opponent's first contention about troop deaths. So basically, they read you a bunch of evidence that says that in order to correctly defeat ISIS, we're going to need a bunch of troops to do this. But we're giving you an alternative option within our first contention. Remember, we tell you that we don't need this large, massive ground troop force to be able to combat ISIS effectively. We can do it and defeat them in 2 unique ways. First, with intelligence gathering, and second, with leadership decapitation. That comes through the use of special forces and spec ops. And when you use those, there's actually a couple key reasons why they're more beneficial, and they're going to avoid a lot of my opponent's impact that they say are so harmful. And that's, first of all, because of a lack of visibility. When special operations go in and are conducted, they're not visible to the local population. They're covert missions that are done under the cover, under guise. So the point is that local populations don't see, civilian deaths are not as large scale as a ground troop operation that's on a full scale of 100,000 troops. Second of all, they can't see that and gain the anti-American sentiment that my opponents are talking about. It doesn't happen because they don't see the people in the region, and that's what causes it. But furthermore, what we can see is that we can, because we can effectively do this, we're gonna preempt any problems that the United States could gain and harms to United States troop deaths that would come from a longer term worse war if ISIS were to become even more powerful. We're preempting that and solving that problem in the status quo with special operations. But then go to their second contention about the political problem. So they try to tell you that essentially, it's a resorting of political violence. And essentially they try to blame the entirety of the situation on the fact that the United States went in, and that's the reason that ISIS was created. But the problem was that the US involvement was not the sole factor in the creation of ISIS. In fact, the Daily Mail attributed to there's multiple factors that occurred. During the Syrian civil war, there was actually a large climate change issue that caused a lot of famine that pushed people to join and form this group because there was no other way and they had nothing else to turn to. The United States was not the sole factor. While it may be an issue, remember, first of all, we can tell you the visibility is the key link into all of these arguments that my opponents are talking about, and we're preempting, and we're not actually having that link, we're not doing that because the visibility isn't existing. Because there's multiple factors, they can't make the assumption that when we go again, there's going to be another attack. They can't, they're just making a prediction based off of a previous situation. But then what you're actually going to be seeing is that the military intervention that they talk about doesn't push people towards terrorism. Actually, Troy from the University of Chicago in a 166 country analysis found that specifically when troops are sent into the region for the sole purpose of combating a terrorist group, it actually saw that there was a reduction in, first of all, terrorism, second of all, and a reduction in violence as well. So not only were less people joining, there was less attacks that were actually happening. But then go to their third and final contention on civilian deaths. So yet again, the big link into this argument is the idea that when they see the the foreign actor in the region, that causes the backlash and the increase in anti-American sentiment. But what Rachel Goldbrenner from Princeton University actually says, when you look to the data and all of the instances in the past when we have gone in the area and in Middle Eastern regions, for example, the problem is that it is not specifically the United States itself that is causing people to turn towards terrorism and increasing their anti-American sentiment. There was never a poll conducted and it was why are you joining groups? And it's specifically this reason. If anything, what she says is that there's no causal relationship that they can make first between recruitment, but then second of all, the actual violence in and of itself. They don't have that causal link and they don't establish that within the case. But then second and finally, what you're going to be seeing is because that anti-American sentiment is contingent upon visibility, yet again, we preempt that problem through special forces, and that's the best way to solve this problem. You're going to need to be affirming.
Okay, we'll take a little bit of running prep time starting right now. First. Okay, we're done.
How much time is left?
124 left, I think.
Do you mind if I give a little roadmap? It's gonna be a little bit different. So, I'm actually gonna go, I'm gonna do framework, but it's mostly gonna be derived from the end of their case, and then I'll go back to the top. So it'll make sense once I start, I promise. So my opponents make a really critical mistake at their end of the case when they elaborate why ISIS is a threat to the United States. They say, quote, ISIS threatens and kills Americans. In that sentence, they implicitly agree to a cost-benefit analysis on American lives. If they don't give you a number as to how many Americans die, they can't win today's round because they told you the metric of how we should be evaluating the round. We agree. You should look to American lives. In our world, 4,500 people die. In their world, 2 people per year die. Let's go into like the second observation I have on the framework level. So the idea is that they have to show a long-term solvency for the region. If they don't do that, then the same recurring sectarian tensions that we discuss in our contention too that they misunderstand just come back to the surface, and more nationalist groups come up, and you don't solve any problems. Just like what happened with AQI in Iraq in the 2006 through 2009 period when we tried to destroy AQI. That's really critical because we're going to win the round outright right here. Foreign Affairs says that because the United States has no regional partner and there is no actor that is capable of doing so, 35% of all land that ISIS owns is completely ungovernable. Insofar as that's true, there is no long-term solution to this problem. There will be another nascent terrorist network. They don't solve anything. Let's go to their first contention in which they talk about special operations forces. First, it's a plan. There's literally zero evidence in the real world to suggest that special operations would be used in like a realistic scenario. More importantly, Peter Nealon writes that in the real world, it seems to appear more and more inevitable that Western involvement is coming, and there are no indicators, I repeat, no indicators, that there would be anything other than lots of high-profile army vehicles, lots of high-profile infantry, and a repeat of the later stages of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I'm giving you specialists that tell you that the invasion of ISIL is going to look exactly like the invasion of Iraq, and insofar as that's true, you should be buying my links into troop death, which they don't respond to. You have 4,500 dead, and that's why we're winning the round. Next, like they give you 2 reasons special operations people would work, right? Intelligence and decapitation. But never once in their contention do they actually say that these would defeat ISIL. Like I remember listening to it, and they don't say that it would defeat ISIL. They say that they would be good. But it's problematic for 2 reasons. First, because the invasion of Afghanistan was also preceded by a CIA-backed special operations invasion, and that didn't work out very well. But more importantly, because decapitation almost never works. James Russell concludes that leadership decapitation as a strategy is short-sighted and ultimately bound to fail and may actually increase threats to the country. That's because Jenna Jordan finds in her cross-sectional time series analysis there is no statistically significant effect of decapitation on long-term longevity because decapitation causes what's called factionalization of an organization into smaller, more dangerous groups, causing an increase in political violence. The reason the smaller groups are more violent is because they have more to prove. They need to assert dominance. That causes more instability. It doesn't provide a long-term solution, and that's why we're winning, because at the end of the day, they don't provide a long-term solution. Here's the kicker, though. This is ISIS-specific evidence. According to Al Jazeera, ISIS has an especially resilient command and control system due to its strong diversification of leaders. They have 2 leaders for each of their provinces, 12 sub-leaders below that, and then 24 governors. Like, there is no one leader that you could kill that would decapitate ISIS, and it has multiple redundancies because ISIS expects some sort of incoming casualty. So let's go to their second contention. 1, it's just 100% defensive. We don't need to win this contention because we're not advocating that any of this go forward. Second, it agrees a large force is needed. That's the reason that they give for the warrant on why Iraqi soldiers are not good enough, because they don't have the manpower to take out ISIS. That concedes our link. Second, like they also say like ISIS won't be pushed out, quote, for another year or 2. Fine, like then they'll be pushed out in a year or 2. We're fine with that because it still solves the problem in the status quo. They actually concede the solvency. Then they talk about Iran and how they're using ISIS as leverage. So there's really no warranted link there, especially because Jordan Dodger of the CFR writes that the current ISIS status of the United States helping like Iran-backed Shia militias is paving the way for a, quote, reset of relations between the United States and Iraq and Iran, like what usually happens on the battlefield when people find a common enemy. And it concludes that that could actually pave the way for a future nuclear deal. That's really important because I'm showing you what's happening in the real world. We're coming closer with Iran. At the end of the day, what matters isn't that like other actors fail, it's that if we intervene, things get much, much worse. Thank you.
Are you ready for this?
Whenever you want.
Okay, so do you mind if I ask this
Yeah, of
question?
course.
Okay. So why does the card at our end, like the end of our contention, mean that we're like hardcore like numbers game cost benefit analysis on
Sure,
those?
because the warrant that you give for why ISIS is bad is because it threatens and kills Americans, right?
Sure, but why does it
So,
mean like?
all right, I'll explain it.
Okay.
Right. So it's like if we tell you that like we're threatening and killing more Americans by like attacking ISIS, then like clearly like one has a larger magnitude than the other.
Right, but if
so
we're
can I ask
still-
a quick question?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
All right, so you say in response to our first observation, like you agree that lives matter, but we should look to future lives also, right?
Yes.
So I guess then like sure, that's true. Let me pose the question. In the future, if we let ISIS go unabated, or like regional actors deal with it somewhat, how many more Americans die?
I mean, that's a projection into the future, like I can pull up and see if we have some, but the idea is if like ISIS
A
was to be,
ballpark
like,
number maybe?
I mean, if ISIS is able to gain like types of like biological, like chemical
Is
weapon
that a
capabilities.
thing that's even possible?
Yeah,
Like,
it is quite possible
do
that
you
it-
have evidence to
yeah,
support
I
that?
can pull that up for you, like it's quite, like it's a possibility that they could gain and like an ability that they could have, and at that point, that's when American lives
That
become more
seems like a lot of
important.
speculation, and like also like John J. Mearsheimer says that that's really not possible in terms of acquisition because chemical weapons degrade over time, and also like I'd really like a number to stack against 4,500.
Sure, like I can pull up and see if like I have a projection into the future of like if it gets worse, how many, but like right here, I don't have like a.
Okay,
set.
I'm just
Can I ask
trying to
a
be able to
question
weigh
now?
it. Sure, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sure. Let's talk about like the political problem. So like
Okay.
the idea is like, maybe explain it to me because I missed
All
it a
right,
little bit.
yeah,
It's
sure.
like you talked about me misunderstanding,
So
but it's like it gets worse because like I thought it
No,
was
it's
just
not
the
a
creation of
backlash
ISIS.
argument.
Okay,
No,
so.
definitely not. The idea is that the root of ISIS, the root of AQI, the root of all of these problems is this deep-seated sectarian conflict, Sunni versus Shia, that's been going on in Iraq for the past like 50 years, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is that if you brush away ISIS, which is kind of like the top layer of this like sectarian crisis sludge, if you will,
Yep.
there's another layer right below
So
that
what's
is
the
more
unique harm with like the US doing it?
oh,
Like
what-
specific, like okay, like if any like regional actor gets rid of ISIS, right? Why is it
Oh, well,
like
that's-
like why is it uniquely
sure.
US
So
intervention
that's-
that's gonna create the harm?
No, this is like mostly a defensive contention that deals a little bit with the United States in that it links to our third contention
Okay.
about how these groups will be directed
Okay.
against the United States if we invade.
All right, perfect.
That's the interaction. Also because actually, so a couple of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
ISIS right now doesn't like directly launch transnational attacks against the United States, but it's possible that these neo-Ba'athist groups who are upset that we deposed, Saddam Hussein, their leader, the
But that's
Ba'athist
like
faction.
more of the problem, like the point right now. Like there's not a unique like portion within this case. It's
Well,
like,
the Vox evidence that we read that says that there are these groups specifically points to neo-Ba'athist factions within Iraq, and as we know, we deposed Saddam Hussein.
but I
who
guess
was the
yeah, the
Ba'athist
question
leader,
just is
right?
like
So-
the United States specifically, like why
Well,
does
the United
that?
States specifically deposed Saddam Hussein, right? So he's
Right, but if a
we're
regional
specific.
actor was to like get
No,
rid of
it's a good point. I understand, but what I'm saying is that like you're not providing a long, like it's mostly defense, right? I'll be honest.
All right.
We're saying that you don't provide a long-term solution, and if you don't, then you can't win the round.
All right,
Is that fair?
perfect. Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. So you talk about like how we have to preempt a worse war. What's the probability of a worse war occurring down the road?
Well, if ISIS becomes more powerful, gains in power, if regional actors like we tell you in the status quo
Russia
are
got
failing-
more and less powerful over the course of 100 years, but we never went to war with them. China's gotten more powerful over the course of the past 100 years.
At the
but we
point
never
which like
went to war with
ISIS
them.
is directly like it's, I would say it's a unique situation. But that's-
Can you give me like a probability then?
I think is that time?
Sure. I mean, if you can give me a
Yeah, I can see that time.
probability of going to war with ISIS.
Okay, could I see Spec Ops in Afghanistan or Jordan?
That wasn't that. Like I just talked about like
Jen Jordan.
Yeah, I can give you Jen Jordan.
Yeah, sure. Could we see like the possibility of war with
Let me see
ISIL?
that.
Wait, all right. I have it.
Actually, just pull up the date for me. That's all I need.
Sure. 2009.
Awesome. And then actually, sorry, the Al Jazeera,
Al Jazeera.
command and control.
Yeah, that's it.
and
All
all
right. Got
You
it.
guys are taking prep right now?
You both called for cards, so no.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I don't think we called for anything.
I called for something.
Oh, you
Yeah,
did?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sure. That's the 12th. I think.
Oh, no, can I actually see that card?
Oh, sure. This is just a PDF.
Can you show me?
Sure. And I like the, I guess the title. I cited this somewhere. Experts warn killing leaders is not enough. It's like decapitation doesn't.
Does it say like because there's not a singular leader?
I don't know if I
If you
have.
have
Yeah,
questions
sure,
about
sure.
it, you could like, I guess, ask in Crossfire.
I mean, I don't have like a number, like probability, like.
Whatever you
Okay,
have.
I was gonna say.
Sure. This is like decapitation eliminating leaders doesn't work.
Okay,
Is that right?
I'll take that.
It's all that ISIS. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you might see the diverse, like specifically diversity of the structure of Princess Ed. Do you still want?
Sure.
Am I right?
Okay.
It's fine, because she's still looking for something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
here,
we
it's
typically do
basically
that.
the idea is it's like they continue to regroup after things, so like, it was more like, I don't have like specifically ISIS war impending kind of thing, but
Okay.
if that's fine.
Sure.
There you go, thanks.
Are you ready? Judge, okay, cool. So, starting off with framework, basically they're trying to tell you that we have to look to live as the biggest event in today's round, and we agree. But the problem is that they have to prove to you in the long term that we're actually going to be saving, or like saving more lives in the long run. Because what we're actually trying to tell you that if we don't actually go in right now to stop ISIS and they do get stronger, it could end up being worse for situation for American lives, our allies, and basically the whole situation. But now let's look to our first contention, where we're talking about these special forces. And basically, they try to tell you it's a plan, it's never going to happen. But remember, right now in the status quo, they're already assimilating a group called the Task Force Black. So we already see that. It's already going to happen in the status quo, and it's going to happen. That's why it's still topical. They try to tell you, basically, intelligence gathering and leader decapitation isn't actually a way that we can defeat ISIS. They try to cite Jenna Jordan 09. That's going to be problematic because Jenna Jordan does a study in 09, 012, 014, constantly, every single year, 14. She changes her position. She's not reliable. You're not going to want to look to her in today's round. They try to tell you Al Jazeera says that there's not one leader. But the problem is that recently, ISIS's leader was actually really badly injured. And once that happened, they found a new leader, meaning that they rely on a leader. So once we're actually able to decapitate them, we're going to see the benefits. Look to Johnson, who tells you that decapitation actually increases probability of war termination by 27%, and we see that they're 32% more likely to defeat an insurgency. They want long-term benefits. We're giving you that solution that it's like there. Now in terms of regional actors, they try to tell you that like all the different scenarios we provided to you is big troops, and that's a problem. But the thing that is, and what we're advocating for, is that sure, other forces can give it large troops. That doesn't necessarily mean the United States needs to. Remember that none of them are as equipped as the United States. There's literally no other option. Because we've established that there's a threat, someone has to do something about the problem. The only person left is the United States, because the AEI tells you that can only be the United States. Remember that the United States isn't the only contributor to the creation of ISIS, and on top of that, look to Choi, who studies 166 different countries, and tells you that even after troops are sent in, we're not going to see a decrease in violence and a decrease in terrorism, so you firm.
Yeah, can I call it order? Is that okay?
What do you want?
Can I see if you can see that evidence in the Task Force Black?
Yeah. Okay, I can pull up that, and that's in context.
Which
That
part?
should be fine.
Which part?
It's the last card, and I can
Okay.
pull up the whole thing.
No,
One second.
I think it should be fine. Yeah, actually, I need a card.
Yeah, one second. Oh, there it is.
Okay, thanks. What's the date on this?
Is it not
You
provided?
know.
I just pasted this and like printed it.
They don't?
Yeah, one sec. Sorry, I don't know why, I just saved the whole PDF. I don't think without Wi-Fi we would do it, because I just saved the whole PDF.
It's
And I don't know
okay.
why it didn't show, I'm really sorry.
It's okay.
Do you want to prep that?
Yeah, actually, it's super. Go on, Brad.
How much left?
That was 17.
17, you used 17 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay.
How much we have left? I sort of lost it.
You have, all right, one second. You have,
I thought it was somewhere close to 20, but I could be wrong.
it should be 25?
Yeah. I have 24, but I'll take the extra second.
Okay. So are my opponents ready? Card ready? And the judge ready? Okay. The first voting issue is this issue of terrorism that we're trying to solve for in Iraq. And we have 3 reasons why they basically don't have any offense at this point. First is that the root cause of this terror situation is political disenfranchisement of the Sunnis and other groups in Iraq. They never contest that. And that's really critical because what our evidence from the Foreign Policy magazine says is the more support we offer, like if we commit combat ground troops, right, the more rigid he becomes and the less willing to compromise he becomes, right? And that means that there's no power sharing agreement in the future, and that means that actually the root cause of terrorism just gets worse. Terrorism will return even if we defeat ISIL, and it'll be worse than it was before, turning every single impact they want to give you in today's round. But second is this issue of factionalization, right? They urge decapitation as a policy for like the U.S. Special Operation Forces, and we both have studies competing about whether decapitation works or it doesn't. But we're the only evidence that gives Iraq-specific evidence in today's round, right? Because the Vox article says that if you eliminate ISIL, you get other worse, more brutal, more dangerous terrorist groups who have deeper ties in the Sunni population, right? And actually you would be more conducive to a worse terrorist organization, right? So insofar as you're replacing something good with something worse, you're clearly voting for us in terms of committing combat ground troops being bad. But the third reason they're really not getting any offense at this point is the fact that they don't actually say they're going to defeat ISIL. What does it mean if you decapitate a leader? Someone got injured and then they had another leader. That's evidence for us, right? There's no impact, and even if there was an impact, all Muslim-linked terrorism is 2 lives a year. That's not an impact in today's round, that's just a blip on a screen. But on our side, we do have clear impacts, and the first one is going to be the lives of the United States troops we're committing. They say we have this task force black that's already being prepared in the status quo, but also in the status quo, the CIA deputy director says we're going to commit 100,000 troops if we have a combat ground troops mission in Iraq. That means a repeat of mass deployment means a repeat of mass deaths. Even 4,500 lives being lost like the previous mission in Iraq, because this insurgency is just like the previous insurgencies. And even if it's not, even if it's a 10, even 100, there's no way terrorism can possibly make up this massive loss of life that you're experiencing from the committing of combat ground troops. But anyway, at the end of the day, even if you're increasing terrorism, you're increasing even decreasing terrorism, you're increasing the incentive to attack Americans, which is why you find a 30% increase in anti-American terror, because they blame the United States for the actions that are making them weaker. Yeah.
So your Vox evidence talks about these non-ISIS terrorist groups, and if we attack and destroy ISIS, these will become more powerful, correct?
If we weaken ISIS, these other groups will take the lead of the insurgency, and the insurgency will be more brutal and more dangerous according to Vox.
Okay, so how is that, why is that true? Why
Because
does Vox say that
these-
they'll become more powerful?
Alright, so it's like the idea that like when ISIS left Syria, they entered an area in which they didn't have like a ton of regional support from the beginning, so they had to like devote a lot of time to like subduing like Sunni tribes, right?
Right now, it's existing in the status quo. ISIL is not like completely consolidated its area that's
Yeah, they have to fight like a lot of Sunni tribes that like don't want to submit to ISIL rule. But the idea is that like these neo-Ba'athist groups and these like alternative factions already have like a lot of support within these
They're
populations.
indigenous to the local tribes, the
Yeah.
ideology, right? So it's a lot more appealing and a lot more dangerous for that reason.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
All right. So in the Iraq conflict that began in 2003, were there special operations present? Did we like reasonably?
sent, like,
do you think like we probably had like some special?
We
ops
probably
people?
had a task force black, right?
Maybe.
I'll let's like, yeah, we'll like follow up.
All right.
Like,
So
with you, right?
so there's no like exclusivity between committing like our government would probably commit like both special operations and ground troops, right?
I mean, I guess we can't predict like what's gonna obviously happen in
Well, if our
foreign
analysts,
offering.
well, so
If
if
history
you're-
is any
well, not
indicator.
even history. If your analysts say
Oh, yeah, the
that we'll
CIA
probably-
deputy director says that.
yeah. If your analysts say we'll commit, spec ops, and our analysts say we'll commit ground troops, like we
But
can
that's
do
not
both.
doesn't take away the benefits that the spec ops produce,
But
right?
it
So
also
they're
doesn't
sending
take
in.
away.
It doesn't
add
take
to
away
like
the arms that
exactly
combat ground
adds in
troops.
the disadds of combat ground troops, which are disadds that would not exist absent an invasion of ISIL
So, like,
in that world.
Our, like, I guess the argument that we're trying to make, right, is that, like, this is like we're like giving an option, right, that they, with, like, committing ground troops.
Well, we
like,
have to
this is a
look
way
at what
that
would
we
happen
have
in
to-
real world,
That's
right?
fair. I think Ben and I agree at this point in the round that we would have some intermingling of special operations in ground troops. That's
In the
fair.
wider operation.
in the wider.
If we were to commit
Alright,
combat ground
so
troops.
I guess, yeah.
Can I ask
So
you a question, actually?
just-
Sure.
All right, so I guess I asked you this question last Crossfire, and you said you'd get back to me. And so, in the long term, right, when ISIS becomes more dangerous, how many Americans die?
I mean, we can't predict that number.
Can you give me a ballpark there?
I really don't, I don't know if I have the ability to just be like X number of
Instead
people,
of
I don't wanna
that-
like
instead of
grossly
that-
over.
I'd like
I
to
guess-
say
I guess-
a really big number,
like,
like that's
let
what
me-
I want.
Yeah, if you
ask
want
you-
me, if you want me to predict, I'll be like, all
I
of
guess-
America, like,
Yeah.
but like.
Let me ask this in a different way, right? Will terrorism get 5 times worse than it is now?
I mean, if you're like, you're trying to like go off of your number of like the 2 deaths, a day, right? But
Muslim
like,
terrorism
at
is
the point,
responsible for 2 deaths a year.
right, but we have no way. Like, in this stat, like, things could change, and that's like the argument.
But, like, how much are they going to change,
No, it's
right?
possible
Like-
that they change, but the idea is like to use like
We
statistical
fought our
terminology.
previous war in Iraq against AQI, which some analysts, the New America Foundation including, think was more powerful and more deadly and more dangerous than ISIS is now. And it's still 2 deaths a year, right?
It still harms to American lives that we are.
But it's
I'm
not-
gonna say
Yeah,
that
but
in
it's
the
not
long
a
term.
weighable harm,
Yeah,
is what I'm saying.
it's not 4,500 people.
It's like 15. I'll figure it out. So the problem with like the root cause argument that they get up here and say is that it's not unique and they never uniquely link it to the United States specific intervention. And at that point, if it's a problem that is gonna happen in any other situation, we're gonna tell you why uniquely you wanna prefer the United States being involved. Because we tell you that in the status quo, any other situation that we can provide you is not gonna be one where you're gonna see a long-term solvency. In the, like the probability of long-term solvency and long-term success exists best in the negative world, and we're gonna, or in the affirmative world, and we're gonna tell you that for a couple of key reasons. So first off of special forces, the first place you're gonna be voting. Remember, my opponent's trying to get up here and tell you like maybe we'll work in conjunction, this and like they're making those speculative arguments, right? But we're just advocating, our advocacy is this one specific type of operation that we're gonna go in and commit. And when we do this, we see 2 benefits that uniquely come from this. First, intelligence gathering. As the Washington Times tell you, when we do this, it allows not only our airstrikes to be more effective, but our actual like everything that we do in order to combat ISIL will be more effective. And then second, leadership decapitation. Now, they try to get up here and tell you about this like hierarchical structure and how it's not like the factualization, but in the status quo, there are leaders that are taken out and those cripple ISIS, and we're doing it and it's working. Remember, Johnson tells you that decap increases the probability of war termination by 27%, and it's 32% more likely to defeat the insurgency. And in the status quo, because ISIL is a threat, because ISIL is a problem, not only to United States citizens, but all lives in general, which all lives are important, both Middle Eastern and the United States lives, the way that we solve this problem isn't by letting regional actors that we talk about in our second contention go around and not fix the problem, drag conflict out, or create more of these like subgroups to come forward, but rather use the best tools that we have in the world, which is that of the United States forces, and taking those specifically. Remember, at the end of the day, the one contention that they clean extend through summary is troop deaths, but remember that we tell them that we can combat ISIS in ways that don't require the 100,000 committed troops, that it's contingent to their harm that actually existing. They never disproved that, and so for those reasons, you need to refer.
We'll take the rest of our time. Great. Okay. We have the decapitation of our backs today. What your opponent? Mine.
All right, are my opponents ready? Partner?
Yeah.
Judge? Okay. I can't tell you honestly what the solution to the problem is, but it's sure not to make the problem worse. The first voting issue in today's round is terrorism, the first point under which is disenfranchisement. We tell you that that's the root cause of terrorism in these areas, and they don't provide meaningful long-term solvency. That means that even if you do everything they say, another group like ISIL comes back. They say, where's the uniqueness? Well, first, their impacts are gone. But second, now these groups hate America because we're the people on the ground that are attacking them. That's the Eric Neumeyer evidence from Case that says that we increase anti-American terrorism by 30%. But second is the idea of factionalization. So this is really important because we both give statistics about decapitation, but only we give a warrant, only we tell you why. And that's why you vote for us. We tell you that when you take out a leader, it cripples the it takes the organization and makes it into several more violent sub-organizations that need to prove themselves and assert their dominance. We tell you with Vox that these new groups are more dangerous, more nationalist, and more aggressive, and that's the same 30% increase in anti-American terrorism, and that like they just don't respond to. And lastly, they never say, like nowhere in their case do they say that that they defeat ISIL. Like, that's just a fact. The only place in which they say that they defeat ISIL is in their second contention when they say that Iraq in 1 or 2 years will push out ISIL in the status quo. That means that we win without advocating any extra troops. That means that we win just straight up off the bat off of status quo solvency. But let's go into like where the real easy impact comparison comes down in terms of weighing. So they say on their side of the flow that you're going to have this task force brigade of special operations, and that that's what they're advocating for. And we tell you that in the real world, SOFREP says that almost certainly we will have a large-scale ground invasion of ISIL. So at the end of the day, we synthesize these ideas, they're compatible. You can do both, and you probably will do both. And that means that even though you probably get some decapitation, which we have turned, and you probably get some intel, which they don't terminalize, you definitely get 4,500 troop deaths, which is the clear, most easily extended, highly weighed piece of evidence in today's round, because on comparison, the only possible metric of American civilian deaths that they give you is 2 people per year. Look, at the end of the day, whenever we intervene in the Middle East, we tell you that we'll kill the terrorists, and we'll tell you that we'll increase stability, but it doesn't work. Let's learn from the past and negate. Thank you.